This is typically what a basic template looks like. It shouldn't look like this because it's too simple, but for something really easy, that's what it looks like. You have your name of the template, which is the top part is the metadata and the info. You have to give it an ID. You can skip some of those other options, but the ID is required. It has to have dashes, no spaces. But then you give it a name, you give it your author, you give it the severity, really important. We'll talk about that right in just a sec. Then you want to give it tags. Tags are going to be our best friends at the end of this. I'm going to show you all that in just a sec. The reason why I kind of emphasize on those two is it's going to help us organize these so you're not running 10,000 templates at all times. You are running for a specific thing. I am looking for a specific thing that is marked by one, the severity, and two, based on the tag. That tag could be a vulnerability tag, it could be a tech stack, it could be a methodology, it could be all the Nuclei templates that you have downloaded as community base that you want to include or exclude, okay? And obviously we have a request. We need to say, hey, this is what I want to send to the server, and this is what it looks like. I want to do a GET request, and the base URL is the -u that we give to Nuclei, and we say this is the path. And you can have one path, you can have many paths. And then you obviously want to do your matchers, which we'll get into in just a bit, but the matcher is the one that says, hey, this is the behavior that I want you to match within the response, within this request. And if that matches, that is a valid finding. It could be a vulnerability, it could be matches what we're looking for, okay? Very basic stuff. Hopefully everybody here kind of is familiar with this, yeah? So if you want to invoke, if you want to invoke your or use your template, you just do -t path to the folder or the file that you just created, you give it a URL, the most basic form of using Nuclei. But remember this one, we talked about doing tags and doing severity. Well, you can also do it with tags. You can say, I only want to run anything that I have tagged as recon because I'm in the reconnaissance phase. I want to look for all these GitHub instances and Tomcat instances and Atlassian tools, right? You can also look at based on severity in tags. So maybe you're not trying to send a bunch of requests to export anything, but instead you're trying to look for things that are informative that you can later hack on. Maybe you have a template for this company where it's going to show a specific CMS that they have or framework that they have created, okay? So another example of it is you can have any type of method in there, right? I'm skipping, by the way, you're going to do dots in the beginning for the info. It's a metadata, I'm going to skip it, but it's really good to have. Please get in the habit of creating those. But you have also the approach of creating a request body. You can say, hey, this is, I want to do a post. You have to do one post, put, get, delete, whatever you want to do. And then you say, these are the different paths that I want to go for. API login, whatever the path is. And then you say, I want to set the header as content type. And I want to send the body as username and password, and I want you to look for login successful. So if I get login successful, it means that they're using this weird password, right? The big thing here is the header for two reasons, because you need to set a header for JSON obviously, but also a lot of bug bounty programs require you to have a header when you're doing automatic scanning. So when you create these, just throw them in there. I don't throw them in there because I don't want to get caught with my IP address, but you should throw them in there because then they're going to find out who you are and then you're going to get an email from Ari or Harley it'll run you about it, okay? So just make sure you have those headers in there, but it's a part of the request. You have to have it in there. So this is what the three things that are really, really important in this one. You can also do a raw request. So let's say that you are hacking on a specific application, a specific framework, and you know what the login looks like. All you want to do is send the same request over and over, or a virtual request for username and passwords, which we'll talk about in a bit. But you can also give it a raw request. You don't have to do anything custom. You don't have to give it anything else. Just go raw. Here is all lines of the request that you can get on IDO, Burp Suite, or whatever tool that you're using. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of water, but I'm going to ask a question. I want you guys to look at this and tell me what is very specific about this dashboard that we can use based on these visuals to create a template, just based on everything we see on the screen. What's so unique about this that you can put in a template? The table could be one, but what is more obvious?
Copyright.
Copyright is a really good one. The internal use is a really good one. Okay, so you can do any of those, right? You can do the memory usage, networks, but the thing that you have to keep in mind is if you're doing those boxes, maybe those boxes and their title change. So you may have one that doesn't have CPU usage, but that's your fingerprint service, right? So you want to stick to the things that are going to be very obvious, and that is the service status dashboard at the top. Someone mentioned the component at the back. Somebody up here mentioned the internal use only. All those things are the things that you want to create. So let's start off with our dashboard right here. We're going to say the name of it as exposed server. The ID is there. Severity is medium or not. I will leave it as medium for now. Description is detected open exposed dashboard. And then the tabs are like recon. If this is for a specific program, let's say you're hacking on Yahoo and you send Yahoo has this all over infrastructure, you want to see it for it daily, you throw Yahoo in there, Nginx dashboards exposure. Those are just random tags. It's just I want to show you how to organize your Nuclei templates. So let's start with our HTTP request. The basic would be maybe in the web group, maybe it's in stats. If you're saying yes to this, that's wrong because you want to always add more paths. Think of other paths that we can think of, right? Maybe it's dashboard, maybe it's internal, maybe it's admin. I know it's hard to come up with things and get creative, but it's really not that hard to go. Maybe admin is something that's really common for these stats to live in. But also you have AI. You can ask AI to give you a potential list of places that a stats dashboard could show up in. Maybe we can give you other paths, right? And then we want to do something like a matcher condition, which I'll talk about all this in just a bit, but I want to say the status is 200, and I want to look for a regex that matches Nginx, which will look for the Nginx version. I'm going to not talk about that until tomorrow, where we have an entire workshop on it. But we do that, and we also look for some words, and then we say, I want you to match the word service status, dashboard, and internal use only. Okay, so far so good? All right, when you run it like this, you see I use the verbose tag in all of my runs. I'll explain why at the end. But then you run it and it comes back and says, yep, one match was found, and this is it. So that's kind of what it looks like when we create your own. Again, you can use -t, you can use the dash tags and call it within those tags. Everyone following so far? Too fast, too slow? All right, cool. All right, let's talk about matches, because I think Nuclei as a tool, what's made it super powerful is the matches. It's the one thing that everyone relies on to find the thing that you should deal in the haystack that you're looking for, right? So you can match a bunch of different things. I personally like to use the anything that's HTTP, and that's what we're going to cover throughout this course. The top two, the regex is what I will use most of the times. Then DSL is a hit or miss. I'll show you guys all of that in just a bit. I'm going to just fly through some of these because we won't use them, but I want to kind of show you what it looks like. So when you do a matcher, you have to say what type. These are the types we have: status, size, words, regex, binary, hex, DSL. And then you want to say what status do you want it to share, or whether it's 200, 302, whatever. Then you want to do maybe a binary. You can do the same thing. Type binary, you can give it a name, and those are the three values that you want to look for in the condition score. And then the part where you want to look for is in the body of the response. Maybe you want to do a hex. We probably won't use any of these, but just so you know, you have that option. You have your X path, you can say, hey, I want it to contain this example domain. By the way, these are all from the Nuclei docs too, so if you see me going through them fast, you can RTF them pretty much. And then you have your DSL, which is really good because then you can now create one line of code that says, hey, if the length of the body is more than this, because maybe the error page is that many bytes, and then you want to do a status for 200, you can do that with DSL. I don't see another good documentation for how to use this on Nuclei, but it does come in handy with just when you're combining little bits of information from your target. Like it's behavior thing that I use DSL for. If the behavior changes because the response is suddenly not what it's supposed to be, then I know that matches what I'm looking for. Okay, these are very niche, but when it comes to matches, you can have multiple. There's a matcher that you can say, in your matches, you can say, I want you to match this word or this word. But I want you to match this word and this word, okay? Those are really important. I was creating a template for 35 minutes, and I realized I had an or in there, not an and. And I kept going, why aren't you working? And then I realized it was an or and not an and. So it's really important to make sure you have these the right way. And that's kind of what it looks like. You can say, hey, I want you to do these two. In there, you can see it's doing the words, server, Node.js, and powered by Node.js, and it's saying it's or in the header. The first one is an and in the header, looking for both of those, okay? So far, so good? Okay. Then you have your matcher conditions. At the top, you can say how many of those matchers that you have specifically, so you can have multiple matchers. You can say, I want them to be and or. So I want them to match all of these, or I want them want to match one of those, okay? So you can have a condition that applies to all of the matches that you have written for a workflow, for a template, and everything else. That alone is very powerful because you can just not worry about it and go. Just gotta go through all that list. If everything matches, I am not going to have any false positives, okay? Because we want to avoid having those as much as we can. So this is what it looks like. At the top, you say matching condition is and you can see I have two words matching for the header in there that says the condition is or, but it has to match both of those two. So it has to find one of those two in the PHP, it's an or, and then also it has to have the word PHP in the body. Okay, so both of those top and bottom has to work. The top one is an or. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Now, fuzzing with Nuclei, I think this is one of the underrated parts of Nuclei, and I'm going to show you just a little bit of it because you can do a lot of cool stuff with it, but please let me make you understand that what I'm teaching you here shouldn't be what you apply to finding bugs. It shouldn't replace the process of you looking for the vulnerabilities. This is what I do when I'm in what I call in a desperate time. I'm looking for some vulnerability that I could use in my chain. Maybe I need an open redirect for Sassana, for example, and I want to brute force work across an entire organization, right? So I just want to preface with that. Please don't think this is the thing that finds vulnerabilities. But if you're in a jam and you need a vulnerability to chain, this is a really good place to go. Anyone here? I didn't answer, but anyone do fuzzing with Nuclei already? Couple hands. Okay, awesome. Okay, so when you're doing fuzzing, you can specify which area of the HTTP request is that you want to fuzz. And that could be the query, that could be the path, that could be the header, that could be cookies, the body of the request, all of that. I'll show what all that means. But with fuzzing is where we alter the value of the thing that we want to get something that is, it's a problem. It changes the behavior, whether it allows us to inject across a scripting payload, for example, or it throws an error of some kind, or it finds something that could lead us to a vulnerability. That's the idea of fuzzing with this. So this is what a request will look like, but these are all the different values. We have a key and we have a value for each part. So with the part query, the key here is the parameter ID, and the value is 10. The key here is username, the value is nonce. So the part here we're looking at is the query. Okay? Then we have the path. This is obviously the path we want to brute force for. I wouldn't use Nuclei for this. You can use FF and other tools, but you have the option when you want to chain a bunch of different things within the same template. Then we have the parts. It's really important to understand that all the headers in there are a part of the header value, but not the cookie header. Okay, the cookie is its own thing. But then we have things like the key is user agent. The host could be the one that you change. Maybe you're brute forcing for SSRS or vhost with Nuclei, and then you have obviously your part is cookie. And you can say, hey, this is some value. I want to brute force the value of something. And then of course you have the body where you can also fuzz for, whether it's for usernames and passwords and everything. Okay. This could be. I hope you're sitting there going like, once I show you the way I use it, you can think of all the possibilities of like password brute forcing for default credentials, fuzzing for parameters, automatically fuzzing for vulnerabilities and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at creating a workflow, and that workflow is going to help us do a bunch of things. It's going to be created for fuzzing templates of your favorite fonts. Maybe it is a single use for a parameter. Maybe we import URLs from a JSON file. Anyone here ever import Swagger JSON into Nuclei and let it test? You can do that. It actually does a lot of tasks for you, which is incredible. And you can also obviously fuzz for vulnerabilities or use them in chains. So the workflow essentially will look something like this. Obviously, the amount of sources I have are not enough, but think about it. You can crawl the entire website. You can use API sticks. You can use Wayboard. You can use get all URL. You can get Wayback URLs. I can't think of what it is. You can subfinder anything. You can use subfinder to Katana with your cookies, and it gets all those requests and all those paths, right? And then you can fit it to HTTPX maybe to find the ones that are 200, so you're not wasting your time with the ones that are old and 404, and then you do that API fuzzing, okay? That's our ultimate goal here. So here's an example of an open redirect with one payload in it, okay? And I'm gonna break it down for you. So what we're doing here is we're saying for the HTTP, I want to give it a payload, and we're going to payload with a parameter redirect, okay? That's how we're gonna call our payloads into our request. And then the third line on the redirect is our payload. I'm not giving HTTP there because it will sit down at the bottom, but that's what I would put like nahomesec.com at nahomesec.com, like anything else that I want to put in there, right? And then you say, I want to fuzz, we start fuzzing, template, and then we say, the part that I want to fuzz is the query. I want to do mode single. That means it's going to do every parameter one by one instead of all of them at once and confusing it. And then we say, this is how we're going to fuzz. We're going to add HTTPS before my value of redirect, which is nahomesec.com, and then we're going to run it. And we're going to look for some matches. Maybe we'll do a regex that looks for a header in the HTTP response and says, hey, if the location changes to any supplements at nahomesec.com, I want you to alert me, and we're looking for status codes 301, 302, 307, right? Those are the behaviors that we think is going to be the ultimate end goal, as long as it matches both of those. So the location header changes, and we're getting a status code change of 300, then we're solid, okay? And we run it. It is really important to make sure you do DAST at the end, because it will not work without it, or for the dynamic application security testing. But this is just one of our labs that we have. It's the most basic one. But you can see I've added a bunch of random parameters, but it's testing every single one of those parameters. And the reason why we verbose with the -v is because I want to see my templates working properly, right? You have to do this all the time. In the first view, I create a lab, I run it, I do verbose to make sure it's sending all the requests, and we get our first vulnerability. You can do the same thing with XSS. You can literally put the XSS payloads in a list instead of my nahomesec.com, and then feed it to every parameter, and all you have to do is look for the XSS payload in the response, right? As long as those closing and opening brackets are there, you're good. I don't send XSS payloads, I just do opening bracket, test 1, 2, 3, 4, closing bracket. If those brackets are in there somewhere, it's a good start. I'll do the rest manually because then I'm intrigued, right? I want to keep looking. So, when it comes to doing this, you need some really good reconnaissance. You want to heavily crawl your entire target, and you don't want to obviously rely on this to find you, but you probably can if you have really good data. I haven't tested this, I think I tested it on Ford once, and I found some leads, but it's a VDP. It's just for me to showcase my case study here. But if you have, honestly, a desperate situation, especially for life hacking events, when someone's like, I need an open redirect, anyone's got one? Boom, you just go run this against everything that they have historically on the infrastructure, and you hope that something comes out while you're landing, also looking for those vulnerabilities, okay? So let's talk about more fuzzing. Earlier, what you saw was, I was giving it a list of bullet points of every single payload that I want to try, but I don't have any payload. There's GitHub repositories that you can go to and download it, so we can replace that list instead of going parameter space list, we can actually call a file, and you can say a path to that params.txt, for example, and it's going to do it for you. So you can see right here on the left side is, on my left side at least, it is the original payloads that I had, but my payloads list was getting way too long, so now I just flipped it to redirect as path to my or.txt. You can have like 1,000 payloads in there, and maybe things that you don't even know existed, or tricks that you didn't know existed. But just remember, if you're using someone else's payloads, maybe I am pointing mine to nahomesec.com, but maybe somebody else here is pointing it to os.me. So you want to make sure you clean that list up so your redirect isn't going to somewhere else and then your match is expecting something else, okay? I'm talking from experience here. So keep that in mind. But can we do more? You guys think we can do more? We sure can. All right, so we can also find parameters. This one, I think there are better tools for it, but again, if you do workflows and you're automating things, then you can also do it with just giving it the base URL and say, hey, in that base URL, I want to also fuzz for these params. So we define the params that we want to do it, or we want to brute force for it. We say the params are parameters.txt, and then you give it the matchers, the type is the status. If it comes back as a 400 because the parameter was missing, I want you to do these things for me, okay? And the thing with this one is you don't want it to be a 400. We're doing a negative matcher. So we're saying, hey, because when you send a request on API, most of the time you get a 400 request when it's missing a parameter. So now we're saying, as soon as that 400 changes to anything else, I want you to match it and tell me. So we're saying status 400. If it's negative, make it a negative. As long as that is not true, you alert me.
Quick question. Parameter.txt, what part of the other side with all that?
So the parameters.txt, you see it says params. it's going to be replaced by our params in our path. So params goes to param, and the base URL is what we give it in this action.
Discovery, you copy that.
Yeah. So anything that you want for your parameter, maybe you can get a params.txt from GitHub or something. And then you run it, you can see I'm doing something like API paper. It goes through a bunch of different parameters that I have, and it says, yep, I just found something that matches the parameter file that is no longer coming back as a 400 where it was missing a parameter, okay? Does that make sense? Can we do more? Maybe. We can actually take this a step further. We can actually param mine and look for vulnerabilities. Same thing, this is our original template that I just looked at, but we're going to make a couple of changes here. We want to change the base URL and params, and we also want to change the way the payloads are being handled, and we want to change our matches. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change our base URL to account for both params and payloads. So you can see now I'm doing params, but I'm also saying it equals to payloads, because I'm going to change the right side and add we're going to do an attack cluster bomb, but on the right side, instead of having payloads just be params, we're going to add params or parameters, and also now we have the payloads or payloads.txt. So the payloads are going to go where the payload is in our placeholder, and the params are going to go where the params are. But we can also define vulnerabilities within this. I don't recommend doing them all in one. You can see that I've put a condition of or because it's different vulnerabilities. I don't recommend doing that, but you can do that for different XSS techniques, right? You can say, if I'm looking for a, maybe I'm in a script tag, for example, I want to do this one. Maybe I want to do an image tag. Maybe you're going after a filter, right? You want to see what ones work and what ones don't. But you can do that and define it. This one is for two vulnerabilities. We go back to our last example, we run it, and it comes back and says, yep, I just found a ECC password with the match that you gave me within this API. So you can create some sort of a scanner for yourself for different vulnerabilities, customize it with different payloads. It looks for the parameters, it looks for the payloads, and hopefully it finds you some vulnerabilities. There's a lot more stuff you can do. You can obviously look for passwords. Now that you know how to do both values of payloads and params, you can just change this to username and password, for example. We talked about DAST. I'll give you an example from WAFs. We talked about parameter name fuzzing, but there's also API hacking, and that is something that I discovered recently that I feel like a lot of people don't use when it comes down to Nuclei. So again, Nuclei shouldn't just be for CVEs. I know that's what most people use them for. When new vulnerability comes out, everyone makes a template and scans it, but there's also this value of having a Swagger file that most companies always have available for you. And you can do a lot of cool stuff outside of using it for scans. So the one that I gotta tell you with this is a lot of times these API docs, they don't have a server URL in it. So you have to add that in there because it's gonna be confused, and I'll show you what that means. So this is the one that we have. I know it's hard to read, but the path for this one is just /API. It says URL is /API. Or sometimes it says localhost name. And if you run that, you're gonna get a bunch of errors. So if I'm doing this, my verbose, it shows that it's making a request to ///API staff, and it's like, hey, it's missing things. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this into it. So now I'm adding the URL for where the API is. So Nuclei knows where to send these requests. You can't do that with -u. I've tried, maybe I'm doing it wrong. It could be a skill issue on my end, but I couldn't figure out how to do it with a -URL. So hard-coded in there. If you don't know how to do it for OpenAPI, if you don't know how to do it with Swagger, AI is really good at it. Just feed it to an LLM and do it all for you. And the way you invoke it is you just go -OpenAPI JSON -IAM, which is the input mode that you want to do, which is your OpenAPI, Swagger, and any other imports that you have, and you can do DAST, and it's just going to use all of their, actually, Nuclei has a lot of templates. They're okay. The community creative ones are decent, but think about all the things that I showed you so far that you can create and look for vulnerabilities doing this, okay? And that is something that I talk to a lot of people. 9 out of 10 people don't know you can scan Swagger with this, which is incredible because I find a lot of those Swagger.jsons and just think you can create a workflow. If Swagger.json is found, then invoke this thing, which is going to be our next one. So again, this is how you do it. But the cool thing that you can do it, if you're a automation nerd like I am, you can actually have Nuclei give you all the requests that it has created based on the JSON file, and you can just pull them out of the input and maybe feed it to other tools or just import into something else that you want to scan with. And you can just literally do some regex, do some file editing to just get the URLs, path, and parameters, and just have a list of all of those that were created from a massive Swagger file, for example, okay? The workflows, and the thing that I keep looking to make sure I have enough time to cover is this one, and I'm going to give you the most basic example that I know most people probably don't do, and I did a little bit of research, I couldn't finish it, but I didn't think anybody has even has published saying, hey, maybe look for Tomcat credentials when you find a Tomcat instance instead of running all these Tomcat CDs that are available to us. So the way that workflows work is it's very much an if thing. If this thing is true, then do these things. Those things could be tags. Those things could be severities. Those things could be CVEs, could be templates, could be anything, right? And it does it and it ends it. So the problem with not using workflows and what we're doing nowadays is there's no context. We're shooting 1,000 requests to one web server, hoping one of these scans work. When you have workflows for them, you just run workflows. You start off with workflows and then you get desperate. You can run your 10,000 templates that you have. So what are workflows good? When you have identified and repeatable pattern of vulnerabilities. That could be credentials, that could be endpoints, it could be paths. When you want to detect specific vulnerabilities, when you want to create something very specific for GitLab, Jira, Tomcat, so on. So you know this company is using a lot of X tools or X backends, you can create a workflow for it. And the way to do workflows is with a -W. It's the better way to run a workflow than just putting it all with your templates. And then you do path your workflows and you give it a URL, okay? You can also do it one by one, so if you have a specific one you want to run on your target, then you can just do the path that you're doing template. Okay, let's talk about creating an example for Tomcat. This is actually the default Tomcat workflow that Nuclei gives you. It is great. It works because it works based on the tags Tomcat. If I have any templates that has the tag Tomcat, then I want you to run it. But what's missing in all those templates that are tagged with Tomcat is the part where you brute force for username and password. So you have to create your own, and then you have to tag it as Tomcat. So when you find a Tomcat with it, it triggers this brute force for you. And you can also tell them like, hey, I want you to use a specific workflows or templates to identify if this tech is Tomcat, if it's Nginx, if it's Apache, and so on, okay? And then obviously we have our sub-templates of tags, which I think I've mentioned tags a million times. I hope so one thing you take away from this workshop is to tag everything so it runs smoothly. But then we want to do our raw request. We say, hey, I want you to make a request to get HTML. You can do your semicolon, manager HTML, then the host name, and then you can add a basic base64 username and password because that is how authentication to Tomcat works. So we have our get request, we have our tag, but now we need to define our payloads. Our payloads are going to be our username, which was their username and password. We're going to do an attack cluster bomb, and then we're going to do a matcher that says both of these have to match. The status has to become 200 from 401, and then I want to see the words Tomcat Web Application Manager. And we're doing a cluster bomb because we're going to be doing all of the usernames with all of the passwords. Not a one-to-one, it's one for all the passwords. Okay, so you want to match every single one and see which ones work. If you don't know how the different attack flows are, actually Burp Suite and Nuclei both have different terminology around this, I think, when I was looking at it, but they're different ones. You told me to use cluster bomb earlier for parameters, and we're doing battering was the default that we used. Now we're doing cluster bombs because we're doing a list, and we're going to use the value for both of those lists for both of our username and passwords. And when you run that, and you do a -W Tomcat, and that username and password works, it's going to trigger this and give you that username and password work as well. So the workflows are the thing that I wanted to highlight because of the fact that just think about all of these different tools that are out there that you see people are saying, oh, I just found default credentials on X, I found default credentials on Y. But people, the way that I've seen people do based on what I've asked on my Discord, people that come up to me is like, no, I just run the ones on Nuclei, it tells me which one is, Tomcat, and I manually try it, I go and use another tool that brute forces for me. Why? You can just add another template of your own, tag it as the one you want to do it. You should create these for all these common vulnerabilities, all these common backends that exist out there. So a couple of tips on using Nuclei before we wrap this up, because I think we only have 10 more minutes. The first one is always run and validate on your templates. You do a slash validate and you do it on your own, and the one thing that I think you guys mostly saw me do is a dash verbose for my templates until I start trusting it. It takes a couple of days of using it, a couple of tries until I can trust it. And honestly, you can use GPT for a lot of these labs. You can just go and say, hey, create me a web server that does X, Y, and Z. Maybe sets the HTTP header to a specific thing and the status to a specific thing and prints out the specific word for you. And hopefully now, after the slides, and you guys watching these, the current state changes from what we talked about earlier in our talk, or when I started this slides, to more of understanding all the different options, all the facts, all of the power that goes behind using Nuclei. Hopefully you're not just using Nuclei to run the templates that come on default. You can maybe go and visit some of those default templates and add paths to that. Those paths don't account for context, they don't account for custom paths of those specific things that you're looking for, and obviously going right on templates. And the other cool thing is, while I was creating this, I realized a lot of people actually open source their workflows, they open source their templates on GitHub too. So go on GitHub and look for some of these and see how other people are doing them, and maybe you can get some inspiration on how you want to create your own. And using forward, hopefully this is no longer how you use Nuclei, because I know that's what we talked about earlier. It's subfinder, Nuclei, zero findings, and you start using subfinder with Nuclei workflows, and you're increasing your chance of finding leads that could give you some leads or vulnerabilities as well. And again, as always, if you want to get this for free, because I couldn't get this for one that I wanted you to do my health, please take a picture of this. You're more than welcome to enroll in this in the next 4 days. Monday is when this code will stop working, and after Monday, once we launch the course, the day it starts to get an email, you'll have 30 days access for free, and you can just repurchase if you want, because we're going to keep on growing this course. And again, thank you all for joining me. If you have any questions, we're going to do a couple minutes of questions, and then wrap this up. Okay, I think the website is down. We'll fix it. If there's a problem, we'll look at it right now. And just have that URL. That will be the URL.